Good morning, everyone. Greetings from New York, and good evening for colleagues and friends who are joining from Asia. My name is Qing Gao. I'm a professor and director of the Columbia University China Center for Social Policy. Welcome, everyone. I particularly welcome everyone to this lecture series we are hosting this year jointly with the Weatherhead East Asian Institute. We had our first two lectures in the series. The first one focused on the impact of COVID-19 on public finance. The second one focused on political responses and trust in government. This new lecture today is very special and dear to my heart. It focuses on family caregivers in the post-COVID labor market in China. We have the honor and pleasure of hosting Professor Haijing Dai, who is an associate professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. She is an expert in many things, such as caregiving and receiving, gender inequality, innovative social services, and social change in contemporary China. She is also very unique that she uses mixed methods, a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods to study these important issues. She will present for about 40 to 45 minutes. At this point, I turn it over to you, Professor Dai. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Qing, for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. And it is my great pleasure to share some of the very recent data collection and data analysis in our studies on family caregivers in China. So let me start by sharing my screen. I hope everybody can see the PowerPoint. Okay. All right. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit on family caregivers in the post-COVID labor market in China. And it has been my great research interest actually in family care and family caregivers. And then also it's one of my research interests to study labor market, employment relationships. So then putting these two things together, in the past few years, I have been exploring how family caregivers with caregivers at home and demanding labor market expectations, how are they surviving, particularly in Asian and Chinese societies? Actually, this is not a new topic at all, because there has been a lot of academic attention and research interest in family caregivers. As we know, almost since maybe 3 or 4 decades ago, we have been talking about a care crisis in a lot of countries in the world for many reasons. Among the first reasons is the population aging, and it's a trend almost in all the developed countries in the world and these newly developing countries as well, like in China. So the population is aging pretty fast, and we could expect a labor shortage in the labor market. And on the other hand, there seems to be not a lot of reversal power to stop the declining birth rate in all these countries. So birth rate goes down low, but at the same time, child care becomes very, very intensive and demanding. With fewer children in the family and with a very high expectation of intensive mothering particularly, child care has become a huge issue. But unfortunately, these families with needy or need care persons, they do not receive much help from the outside in many places of the world. There's not enough high quality, affordable care institution or care support outside the families. So to take care of the aging population and the children, mainly they happen at home. So family caregivers become very important people to share these care burdens in this care crisis. But on the other hand, as we have mentioned, because there's a labor shortage, almost the governments in everywhere in these countries, they want to keep caregivers in the labor market. There's not enough labor supply. So then there's huge discussion in academia and also in policy making on how can we help family caregivers and keep their employment and try to help them to keep so-called work-family balance. So it has been a focus of policy making or policy advocacy in a lot of places that we should look at work-family balance of family caregivers, because it's part of the labor rights discourses that we appreciate. And also it has lots of to do with gender equality, because caregivers, they're mainly women. And before I start, I think we should define a little bit. How do we define family caregivers these days? And although it's changing, there are more and more men involved in family care, but statistically, it's still majority. The dominant majority of family caregivers are women. I think the statistics is always over 80% of them. The primary caregivers at home are women. And today we try to extend the definition of care responsibilities to include people taking care of all kinds of family members. It has been a long time in academic research that we emphasize children. So we study parents, particularly mothers, as caregivers. But in the Asian society, I think it's very important that we include these caregivers to the elderly, which is another big topic. But also we should not forget these caregivers who are taking care of other adult family members in their home. So in our research projects, we really want to take a quite holistic view of family caregiving, try to include all these different types of caregivers in our studies. And another very important concept in the study is primary caregiving. So there are two ways to understand it in the literature. One is to understand caregiving as status characteristics. Like we ask people to say, are you a primary caregiver? So usually we say, oh, she's a mother. She's probably a family caregiver. So it's a status, it's a characteristics. In some other research, researchers believe that we should study more the actual involvement in care. Like if you see somebody say she is a mother, but it's possible that at home the grandmother is taking care of the children. She doesn't really involve a lot in the child care. Or sometimes somebody will say, I have a young child at home and this is a father. Maybe he barely spends any time with the children during the work days. It's possible. So in the literature, we always talk about how can we understand who is the primary caregiver. Is it just by looking at their status, or we should have some more definite or detailed, accurate understanding, construction of their involvement in care? So that's a big question for our research as well. And now talk about why we are so concerned about post-COVID labor market, because the COVID-19 pandemic has posed a lot of challenges to family caregivers. These things I think we experienced all over the world. Not even one country could be alone in this. Schools are closed. Many care institutions, daycare centers for the elderly are closed. And the children were put back in home to learn from home. And then it's a great demand and requirement for family caregivers to even shoulder even more care burdens during this pandemic. And so there's something very special of the place I study, the Hong Kong and mainland China, Greater Bay Area. Because probably you know that the story between Hong Kong and mainland China, since the breakout of the COVID, Hong Kong and mainland China take two very different approaches to control the virus. While mainland China is very, very strict on zero case approach, Hong Kong seems to be more liberal in terms of controlling the virus. So then there's quarantine between these two regions of the same nation. So today, if you want to go to Hong Kong from mainland China, you don't have to go through quarantine. But if you want to come back from Hong Kong to mainland China, you have to go through at least 14 days. And I think the maximum is 28 days of quarantines, self-paid quarantines. So basically, these two places are being separated for almost 2 years. And as you can see on the border, Guangdong Province and Hong Kong, there are many families. The family members live in these two different regions. So we could observe lots of prolonged family separation during this pandemic. And on the side of the river, the Shenzhen River, you can observe lots of so-called pseudo single parents. They're not really single parents, but their partner is working on the other side of the river, and they cannot see each other for a very, very long time. And these Asian parents who probably live in mainland China and their adult children are working in Hong Kong, and they cannot meet each other because it's too costly and it's too extended, the quarantine time. So there are lots of discussions, and even in the newspapers, they are replete with the stories of how family members cannot be reunited and they want to move to the other side of the river to be together. But one thing they always bring up is it's very difficult to get a job on the other side of the river because employment is such a huge challenge for these families to reunite. And this is just a picture of how these grassroots organizations, even political parties, are paying attention to this very particular problem of the Greater Bay Area. And they're trying to push for a timeline for the governments on the two sides to work on a schedule to make it happen for the family members to meet each other. Then we have been in this COVID pandemic for 2 years. So there's already quite some research on how this pandemic situation has affected family caregivers. And the main conclusion is that this is an unequal pandemic, particularly for family caregivers. And one of the main themes in the literature is that family caregivers usually experience worse mental health outcomes than non-caregivers. And this is happening for both child caregivers like parents, as well as elderly care, primary family caregivers. And some of the very important indicators that researchers noticed include, one is that they experience more care burdens. Of course, we can understand because children are staying at home, elderly are staying at home, and chronic illnesses are not being addressed enough in this pandemic. So it's a lot of care burdens to family caregivers, and they experience more anxiety, particularly about their productivity at work, their satisfaction with job. I remember one of the papers even discussed the female professors versus male professors. Even though we all have to go back home and teach online courses, productivity is very different. Because female professors like me and Professor Gao, we have young kids at home, and it's really hard to concentrate to publish papers and do the usual things. So there's lots of anxiety being put on family caregivers. And the study also shows that mothers particularly, they have very high level of partner frustration because they observe their kids at home 24 hours a day. And these dads, they could not help a lot. So you can understand the mental health outcomes. And another big theme in the literature is about job loss and income reduction for family caregivers. And this is a really gendered inequality because, as I said, the dominant majority of caregivers are women, and they do experience they cannot go to work. They have to take part-time, so-called flexible work, and their income is being reduced. And this thing affects mothers particularly. The disadvantaged mothers is very clear, the trend in the literature. And also the recent study also shows that there's a socioeconomic status disparity in this inequality. We can imagine these younger and less educated mothers, they are affected harder by the pandemic. So it seems that in the literature, we can see an accumulative work-family conflicts for family caregivers in the pandemic and an increased motherhood penalty, probably for these mothers who have to take care of young children during this very difficult time. Then what about China? I think that's this talk is focused on. And China is quite unique in its approach of dealing with this pandemic. With this, I said, zero case approach, trying to make 0 cases in every city, then so that people can go back to normal life. People can go to work, kids can go to school, kindergartens can be open, and elderly homes can be open. So that's the goal of the policies in mainland China. But unfortunately, no matter how hard they try, there will always be regional breakouts. So these days, I think it's the northeastern part, it's Shanghai area, there are still cases breaking out. So in cases like this, there will be sudden quarantines. Like if in my neighborhood, there's one suspected case, the whole neighborhood will be locked down and everybody will go into quarantine. And the schools and the care centers in these districts, they will be closed. Children will go back to home and start online learning. So everything will happen all of a sudden if there's a case detected in your region. And however, adopting this very unique approach to deal with the virus, China did achieve some achievements, I would say. According to this network survey, it shows that China has the shortest period for parents to have children all day at home, all over the world. So for kids to learn from home, the period, China is among the shortest in the world. It's only about 9.3 weeks for all the children, school children. And also China is doing a great job to keep family caregivers to stay in the labor market. As the statistics show from this network survey, so they surveyed populations in these 8 different nations. As we can see, China has a very large percentage of parents who have to extend their parental leave. However, it has the lowest percentage who have to leave the job market forever. So this is very interesting. You can have very different interpretations of it, of course. But one of the things we can be sure is that because China has this normal life approach, zero case approach, it's making a lot of efforts to keep these family caregivers, particularly parents, to stay in the labor market. However, why the extending parental leave is so large? Probably I would say the parental leave policy in China is not good in the first place. It's very short and it's not guaranteed. So for those who are suddenly quarantined or experiencing sudden closure, they probably will need to have extend their parental leave. But the labor market in post-COVID China is quite interesting. One thing we could assume that did they learn? There's a lesson of family experienced this thing before. Like everybody has to go back to home, and we have this high demand of someone staying at home to take care of children. Even though this period is pretty short for Chinese parents, it's less than 10 weeks, but probably it could show people there's a need that you need some flexibility in this time because there could be a quarantine, there could be a lockdown in your neighborhood. So one question we have is that, is the labor market learning a lesson to be more flexible or to be more family friendly? And also this thing is coming together with a very recent policy approaches or lots of financial incentives from the government to push the society to be more family friendly. In response to the declining birth rate, the aging population, China is promoting that every family should have 3 children now. In less than 3 decades, it changes from 1 child in each family to 3 children in one family. So we really need more children to be born in the nation. And to accompany that, the government is finally realizing that parents are under lots of burdens. So these days, they are trying to put limits on the involvement of parents in the education of their children, try to release some of their burdens. So they have banned after-school tutoring. They have advocated that children should stay in school for longer time. And all these policy programs are being promoted at a grassroots level of China. And I think it's just last month, Shanghai and Shenzhen, they passed the law that should be extended maternity leave. And they want to also advocate for parental leave. Although it's like 10 days, everybody, for a year, if you are a parent. So, but they're trying to implement policies like that to encourage people to have more children. And elderly care is another big issue. China has recently this policy program saying that adult children should buy their apartments in close proximity to their aging parents. It's highly encouraged. You can get financial rewards to do that. And there's also some local laws that adult children should visit their aging parents regularly in order to keep this elderly care under control. So then you can see if COVID is an outside in factor, and then these policy directions are very, very clear, going to that we need more family care. We need to strengthen family care to children and elderly. And another thing is that the economy actually in China is slowly recovering, although it's of course affected by the COVID, but it's one of the nations which still has positive increase in GDP in the last year. So putting these things together, before our research project, we were thinking that maybe our society should be going into the direction to be more family friendly, to be more accepting some kind of needs that people will have to take care of family members. And given the good conditions of recovery, maybe these employers should be more friendly to these family caregivers in the labor market. But that's just a maybe. So we started this research project. We try to understand how do employers understand family caregivers in the labor market? And why do we focus on the employers? Because we feel that it's like a missing link in this whole policy of work-family balance. There's lots of discussion at a policy level, how governments and lots of research of family caregivers themselves as individuals to study their experiences. Do they experience discriminations? How do they balance work and family? Lots of studies are focused on that. However, there's little discussion of how the employers are playing a very important role. If we want to say this as work-family balance, then the work side is on the employers. So we think that we need to understand more of the reasons, their practices, the rationales of the employers on how they deal with family caregivers in the everyday labor market practices. So then, of course, the first difficult thing we will have to do is to define who's the employer. So in our study, we basically studied people who have the experience in HR decision-making in the past year. So anything related to HR, like hiring new people, promotion decision-making, evaluation of work performances, if you participated in these things in the past year, we would accept it as an employer representative. And in our survey and in interviews, we basically met directors of families. There's a lot of small companies, there's one director, so that's the boss. And in large companies, we met HR managers, senior managers, and some junior managers as well. And also people who worked in evaluation groups of the performance of their employees. So these people were included in our sample. And the study was carried out in this year, 2021, in Guangdong Province, mainly in the city of Shenzhen, because we want to do some comparison with Hong Kong, and Shenzhen and Hong Kong very close to each other. And also some of the interviews we conducted in other parts of Guangdong Province. And let me go briefly with the research methods. So mainly we did a CV-based survey this year. What is a CV-based survey? Now the sample, we did a respondent-driven sample. This method is quite appropriate for study settings like this, because in the city or in the province of Guangdong, we cannot be sure of the population of employers. Because we define employers not only as the biggest boss of the company, but HR managers and evaluation members, we cannot be sure of the total population, how many of them are there. So we adopted respondent-driven sampling and try to get a relatively representative sample of employers in the region. And so far, we have completed only one industry in Shenzhen. So that's the data I'm going to share today. But this industry is quite representative. It's the IT and logistic industry in Shenzhen, which is a very young but very powerful industry in the city. And if you imagine these companies like Huawei, like Tencent, these are the representatives of this industry in Shenzhen. So basically, for every respondent, we ask them to complete a manipulated CV-based survey. We would cater to their company. We would tell them, we see this job advertisement, your company is recruiting in this position. Here are 6 sort of hypothetical CVs. Please take a look at it and score them, okay? So in these 6 different CVs, we identify them as men without family care duties, a woman without family care duties, a mother, a father, a man who takes care of aging parents, and a woman who takes care of aging parents. And then how do we indicate that? Men and women, we try to indicate by the name, with very typical Chinese man and woman's name. And then we put some notes towards the end of the CV. For those caregivers, they would indicate that, oh, I have a young child at home, or I have a not so healthy aging parent at home who needs care, and I might need to take leave to take care of this person. And for those who do not have family care duties, we think we want to put them more equally with each other. So we give them a hobby. And this person would say, I play professional golf, or I'm a dancer. I have a very particular hobby, and I'm quite devoted. I might need to take leave to participate in it. So by doing this, we try to indicate that these caregivers or non-caregivers, they're not only a status, they actually have actual involvement in care. For these fathers, father is not only a name. This is a man who claimed that he might need to take leave from work in order to take care of his young child. And then these respondents were asked to complete a score from 1 to 10, score competence, commitment, promotion, potentials. and finally give a yes or no answer. Are you going to hire this person? So it's a very brief survey, but it's quite interesting because it's very manipulated in some sense. And so far, we have collected data from 106 respondents in this particular industry in the city of Shenzhen. And in total, so we have 636 nested candidates, job candidates, in 6 different categories of care duties. And so far, we have also completed 11 in-depth interviews with some of these employers. So now we are just in the process of data collection, and it's ongoing. The data is still coming in. We have only done some very preliminary data analysis, but I think it's a good thing to share these preliminary findings with you today. So from some regression analysis, this is a very interesting table. So we basically picked out these 6 different types of individuals who are in the labor market. This person is saying that I will use my leave not taking care of families. I will use this leave to participate in basketball matches, in golf matches, and in my hobby. So this person is the reference group. But compared with this person, you can see in the scores of competence, female with child, this is the mother, and this is the man taking care of elderly. They score significantly lower in competence. Although we manipulated the CVs, we tried to make the competence of each candidate equal. And we did a pre-test. When we take off the names and the notes, we asked employers to see whether these people are equivalent in terms of their backgrounds and competence. And before that, they said they are the same. That's the feedback we get in pre-test. However, when we put on the names, we put on the notes, right? And then send out the CV, when it comes back, these employers would say, even in competence, they think the mother and the man taking care of aging parents are less competent than the men who do not have any family care duties. So the second item is commitment. So in commitment, all these 4 family caregivers were disadvantaged. These employers, they would rate all family caregivers, mothers, fathers, men and women taking care of aging parents, lower in commitment, in job commitment. And then next question, promotion potentials. Now we don't see a lot of significance here. The only very significant group is mother. And these employers would say mothers are less likely to be promoted in the future. Although they will give lots of comments here, say, oh, you cannot decide from CV of promotion because they need to come to work and we can observe and so on. But in their scores, you can see mothers get lower scores. So then the final question, are you going to hire this person? And the significance is still here for mothers. No, mothers are less likely to be hired, even though the manipulated CVs give them equivalent background competence. And another marginally significant group is men taking care of elderly. So it's marginally significant that this group is less likely to be hired as well. Okay, so from this very preliminary statistical analysis, so these are our control variables. We controlled respondents' gender, age, education level, and the size of their company and the position level. Is this a junior position or is it a senior position? And so from the very preliminary data analysis, we do observe that it seems that family care discrimination is stronger than gender discrimination even in the post-COVID labor market of China. So the discrimination is not really so much about men and women. Of course, we can see mothers are more discriminated still, but you can see even father, who is usually the winner in the labor market in China, is also discriminated in terms of job commitment. So there's a very strong negative attitude attached to family caregivers. And it's also inconsistent actually with the current literature on gender inequality. A lot of studies on gender inequality show that the inequality between men and women, the majority of it could be explained by family caregiving. And in contrast to our pretty optimistic assumption, we did see a very apparent unfriendly environment for family caregivers in today's China. So a lot of literature in other places, particularly in Western countries, they always talk about a premium effect for fathers in the labor market. If somebody is a father, the employer sometimes would assume this person is very reliable, is very responsible, and is very committed to family. He will get premium in terms of employer evaluation. However, in our data set, no. None of these family caregivers can get any kind of premium compared with this man who does not take care of families and who spends a lot of time on personal hobbies. And motherhood penalty is still very, very strong, as in other places in the world. These mothers have young children. They are the most discriminated group among all the 6. And then we also observe flexibility stigma that's in the literature, saying that men, if they do claim they will actually involve in care, there will be discrimination against them because it's against cultural norms in a sense. It's a stigma for men to actually spend so much time in family care. And we could observe this in China, particularly these men who are taking care of their aging parents. This is something quite interesting. We don't know why men taking care of aging parents is so discriminated against, and we're still trying to explore for the reasons. And something I would like also to share a little bit is one of the studies we have published, which was conducted in Hong Kong using a very similar method, but the time was pre-COVID. It's in 2018. So here's our findings in the study of Hong Kong, if you can see. We also used the men without family care responsibilities as the reference group. But if you can see Hong Kong employers in competence, they do not see much difference. So they buy this manipulation, equivalent competence. Then in commitment, you see these are positive. Hong Kong employers think all these 4 groups of family caregivers are more committed than the men who are not taking care of family. And in our in-depth interviews, these employers would say, it's a Chinese tradition that you should take care of your family. If you're at a certain age and you're still playing around, how can you be a very responsible person? So that's the Hong Kong mentality. They're trying to give family premiums, at least in job commitment. And the same for promotion. They think family caregivers are more likely to be promoted in their jobs. And final question, are you going to hire them? And compared with the man who does not have any family care responsibilities, fathers and marginally men and women taking care of elderlies, they are more likely than the men without care duties to be employed. But mothers is not more likely to be employed. So if you compare with these findings in Hong Kong, it's quite shocking in a sense, because in Hong Kong, at least, we seem to observe that Hong Kong employers think taking care of family is a virtue. So it's a combination of meritocracy and virtuocracy. That's our publication in the past. We discussed these 2 different mechanisms of employers to judge who is more deserving or who is more worthy in the labor market. They seem to use 2 different ideologies. They want someone to be have more merits, but they also appreciate you have certain virtues in your family care. So some bonuses for family caregivers in Hong Kong. But however, in the study, we studied young, educated, and so-called very liberal people in today's China. It seems that they're even harsher on family caregivers. They have very strong negative attitudes and discrimination, not only against the mothers, but against all kinds of family caregivers. And it seems that they have very little appreciation of this family virtue that sometimes these Hong Kong employers would bring up in our conversation, because they don't like those 2 candidates who do not have any family care duties. But in mainland China study, we observed that this men without family care duties is very much favored. We see all these negative scores for the family caregivers. So then we asked the question, did the employers really learn a lesson from the COVID, or are they following the national policies to be more family friendly? Seems that so far our answer would be no. And to understand these statistics a little bit better, I will try to share with you some of the interview findings. And these interview findings, I particularly pick those employer representatives who are family caregivers themselves, who have children. So this one said that she was talking to me about a woman who was trying to change the job from Hong Kong to Guangdong. And during the job interview, she was telling me that she wanted to come to work in our company in Guangdong because her daughter is starting primary school here, although her job in Hong Kong paid quite well. Well, I don't know what she was thinking. Basically, that showed that she probably wouldn't be very devoted to work, right? Because she would need to take care of her daughter. By saying stuff like that, I don't think she was very serious about this job application. So that's the direct quote from this HR manager. She thinks that even though she is a mother, she has children, she has one child, she thinks that mother was mentioning family reasons to change job. It's not a serious attitude in job application. And then I asked her, do you remember any men mentioned they need to take care of family? And she said, men taking care of family members, I don't remember many cases like that. Oh yeah, there was this man who said he was very filial pious and spent a lot of time to care for his aging parents after work. Maybe he was trying to deliver a good image of himself, but to us on the interview panel, we found it quite weird. You know, not a very normal and ideal candidate. I'd prefer someone who would discuss his great achievements in previous jobs. So another, I think, very straightforward attitude here. And this is a man, and he works in a quite small company in this industry, and he has 2 children. And we were talking about these days, our national policies are quite strong actually to promote people to be more responsible at home, to take care of family members. And he was saying that, yes, there are lots of state labor policies to comply these days. The nation is concerned with birth rate and there is the COVID-19. Of course, we need to follow maternity leave, annual leave, and excused leave for quarantine and etc. But for a small company like ours, we could just do the minimum just to meet the policy requirements. Like for maternity leave, we will keep her job, but it is difficult for us to keep paying for her social insurances. So they won't pay social insurances. And we cannot guarantee that when she comes back, she will have exactly the same job duties. And like quarantine or school closure, and one needs to stay at home, we would consider work from home. But not all jobs can be done at home. If not, people will then need to take annual leave, followed by unpaid excused leave. No, we don't offer any special leave for those cases. Those are very common practices in companies like ours, as we do not have that many resources. We just do what we can do. So I think this person is very honest in some sense to tell us how they implement these policies. We were also quite surprised by this honestly, that they could speak in your face that they do the minimum. They are not very willing to comply with these policies. They say it so up to front because they think it's the normal practice. Everybody in the front. And lastly, I want to quote this very senior, actually, HR manager. And then she was sharing her own experiences. She said, don't take me wrong. I understand very well the struggles of family caregivers. I raised my daughter by myself, you can see. But I always think one needs to be responsible for one's career development and make good choices and decisions. So throughout this whole interview, this woman was telling us, you should make a good plan. You should be responsible for yourself, right? She thinks that it is personal responsibility that you should take care of your family. It's a competitive society, and one needs to adjust to survive, not asking others to help. It is your family, not anybody else's family. That's her exact words. So make your own plan. Take care of your own children. Don't count on the national policy so much, and don't count on your company to do a lot for you. Okay, so these are some preliminary data. And I think at least we can show some emergent findings from here. So what is exactly the impacts of COVID? I would say probably the COVID did not change the Chinese labor market as much as we had hoped, because in the pre-COVID labor market, this industry, these new industries are famous for their harsh environments. And there's a popular rule called 996, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. That's their normal work schedule. And this very strong, I think it's from Jackie Ma in Taobao. And he particularly said, when you are young, you should work to this extent. because it's good for your future, it's good for your family. There's no doubt on that. So it seems that COVID did not change much on that attitude. And in social sciences, we sometimes hoped that a crisis like COVID-19 could bring some social changes to societies. But so far, we have not observed that in our data. Then we asked what is so strong to resisting any kind of social changes, even though there's COVID situations. There are very strong national policies trying to lead people to pay more attention to their families and to raise more children in families. Then we thought about something, maybe the capitalism with Chinese characteristics. And it seems that that's why the comparison with Hong Kong is quite interesting, because we always think Hong Kong is the capitalist society. It's very free in terms of labor market, and there's very little state intervention in that. However, on the other side of Shenzhen River, we did observe even stronger dominance of neoliberalism, of individualism, that you should be caring for yourself. And competition, self-reliance, these are very popular and even encouraged attitudes in work environments. And then what about family values or family-friendly labor market? So I think in the Western society, there might be this imagination. Chinese societies are family-oriented. We appreciate family virtues. It's our great tradition. We take care of families. However, you can see to some extent, it's true in Hong Kong that employers would say at certain age, you don't have a family, you're not a responsible person. However, at least in the IT industry in Shenzhen, seems these younger, well-educated generation, they're totally freed from that kind of restriction. In our tradition, they feel very much preferred to this man without a family, but spend a lot of time doing his own hobbies. This person is very much preferred in our data. And then who needs to be family friendly? That's a very good question to ask in this environment. Or who should be responsible for the family? I think we Chinese, we still would say, at least in our discourse, we appreciate family, we value family. However, who should be responsible for the family seems to be a question to be asked in the labor market, because family is apparently constructed as a very private domain in our studies. It's a personal issue. It's a personal responsibility. If you want to have a family, be well planned by yourself because it's your personal thing. So the construction of family care duties is becoming more and more private in mainland China, as we can see in the conversations with these employers. Then we can have a reflection on our national policies as well. So the policies I introduced earlier in the presentation, you probably can get a sense. The national government is trying to teach individuals to be better parents or better adult children themselves. Like, you should take care of your children. You should take care of your aging parents, right? Learn to be a good parent. Learn to be a good adult child. So it's a lot of emphasis on individuals, personal responsibilities as well. So these two things, they are coming together in our findings. So there's very little cultural construction that family care is a social duty. So we probably need some social care to release this crisis of care. There's very little discussion, no matter it's in the construction of the employers or it's in the national policies. Then the roles of employers, I think from the study we see, is not being emphasized enough in policy making, because these policies are usually emphasizing on the roles of individuals. Although emergent recently, they're talking about the role of schools. As I said earlier, they're trying to say children should stay in schools a longer time and schools should be more responsible for their education. But it's a just starting policy approach. The dominant policy approaches, they are emphasizing on the roles or the duties of individuals and families. And if we really want to strive for work-family balance for these family caregivers, then the role of employers, we believe, should be emphasized. At least should push them to think harder what kind of things they need to do in order to solve this care crisis, to really keep people to work more productively and happily in the labor environment. Then what kind of intervention from the state is necessary in this employment market? So here's some very preliminary thinking from our side. Of course, these days we're talking about maternity leave, paternity leave, parental leave, family leave. But if you only focus on these leave policies, it's still very, very individual. So it's employers to grant these people some leave, and they go back home and they do their own job. It's still assuming that taking care of children, taking care of your aging parents, it's an individual responsibility, well fitting into these cultural constructions of the employers. Then maybe a better way or stronger way is also starting in China, actually, the care centers, daycare centers, institutions for aging population. However, in these establishment of care centers, what's the role of employers to make them understand that they're not only employers, they should treat their employees not only as free labor, right? They should consider the labor reproduction processes of these people, and they should consider providing some kind of fringe benefits in terms of helping them to fulfill care. So what's the involvement of employer in these care centers is one very important thing I think the society needs to consider. And lastly, very importantly, we believe this cultural construction or reconstruction of the duty of family is very necessary if we really want to see some changes in understanding family care in the labor market. Is family care really a private issue? So that's, I think on the cultural side, it's very much worthy the discussion in contemporary China. And that probably concludes my lecture today. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Dai. What a brilliant talk and so timely. I'm so thankful to you for agreeing to give this lecture, sharing your very newly produced findings. So thank you very much.